The colony's sky fractured with streaks of fire as the first alien salvos hit. Sirens blared across the settlement, but their tone carried more futility than urgency, as though the alarms themselves understood they were too late. Civilians poured into shelters cut into the rock, clutching children and packs of what little they could salvage. The orbital defense grid tried to answer, spitting beams of light into the void, but the enemy ships hardly noticed. On the bridge of the lead vessel, Admiral Threx leaned back into his chair, mandibles clicking in boredom. "Another nest of vermin," he murmured, his words drifting lazily across the command deck. His crew chuckled in agreement. The human colony, perched on a dusty rim world, was no more significant to them than an anthill under a boot. The humans always begged, always fought poorly, and always lost. This would be no different. A junior officer shifted uncomfortably. He was young, his scales still pale from age. "Admiral, the colony is not fortified. This isn't a military outpost, it's civilians. Families." Threx waved a claw dismissively. "Civilians breed soldiers. End the seed, and you end the harvest." His tone was not cruel, only detached, as if he were explaining weather to a child. The officer lowered his eyes, ashamed of his hesitation. Down below, the militia made their stand. Commander Rachel Anders barked orders through static-filled comms, her voice steady though her heart raced. She had fewer than a dozen functional ships, most of them freighters welded with scrap plating. She knew the odds. Her entire fleet could not scratch even one enemy cruiser, but retreat was not an option. Her people were watching. Her son was on the surface. "Keep your formations tight," she ordered. "We'll make them pay for every meter they take." Her second-in-command hesitated before responding, voice low. "Commander, you know we can't stop them." Rachel swallowed hard. She allowed herself a moment's silence before replying, calm and resolute. "We're not trying to stop them. We're trying to show them who we are." The battle was over quickly. Alien cannons carved through human ships like paper lanterns. Each explosion lit the colony's sky, streaks of orange and violet dancing across the thin atmosphere. Rachel's vessel was one of the last to go, her final transmission cut short in static. On the surface, children in the shelters covered their ears against the sound of the bombardment. Then the shelters collapsed. Admiral Threx rose from his chair, brushing invisible dust from his uniform as though the massacre had dirted him. "Log it. Another colony neutralized. Casualty report." "Total, Admiral," his aide answered. "Population estimated at 60,000. Threx nodded once. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. To him, this was housekeeping. Mark the sector cleared. Next target. Back on Earth, half a galaxy away, the last fragments of the colony's transmissions streamed into a war room buried beneath Geneva. A holographic table replayed images in harsh detail. Children pressed against their parents, militia ships breaking apart, Rachel Anders's voice fading into static. The room was silent. General Marcus Hale stood at the table's edge, arms crossed, jaw rigid. He had watched battles before, but his eyes betrayed something deeper now. Not shock, but recognition. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He glanced at Admiral Kean beside him, an older man whose calm demeanor made him look carved from stone. "They knew," Marcus said quietly. "They knew this wasn't a military colony. And they didn't hesitate." Kean inclined his head, voice even. "We told them to stop." The silence stretched. Around the table, intelligence officers, admirals, and ministers avoided each other's eyes. The recording ended, the final scream from the colony echoing into silence. Marcus broke it. "What are the numbers?" 60,000 dead. No survivors." He nodded once, his decision immediate. "Then we answer." A young officer at the far side of the table shifted nervously. "Sir, do we make it public?" Kean finally looked up, his gaze cold and unflinching. "No. Not yet. We don't need their sympathy. We need their fear." Orders rippled outward from Geneva, carried through encrypted channels across Earth, and its hidden outposts. Shipyards that had been dark for decades came alive, floodlights cutting through the night. Engines the size of skyscrapers rumbled awake. Half-built ships, hidden beneath civilian cargo shells, shed their disguises. Dockyards flooded with personnel who had trained for years without ever admitting what for. At a training base in Luna's shadow, Captain Elias Vance received the signal. He stood at the edge of a hangar where his crew was assembled, their faces lit by the glow of a battleship's activation sequence. He thought of Rachel Anders. She had been a friend once long ago, before she'd chosen the frontier. His throat tightened, but his voice when it came was sharp as steel. They think we are fractured. They think we are tired. They think we've forgotten what we are. He paused, letting the weight settle over his crew. They will learn otherwise. For a brief moment there was silence. Then, without shouting, without cheering, his crew saluted. No celebration, only grim acknowledgement. They all knew the cost. In the void, Admiral Frex's fleet cruised on, already plotting its next conquest. Reports of human mobilization reached them, but were dismissed as exaggerations. Frex himself chuckled when he heard the numbers. 500,000 ships. From primitives who scrape in the dirt? Let them come. Yet even as he mocked, his junior officer remembered the flames on the colony's surface, the look in those civilians' eyes before the bombardment. He said nothing, but the unease lingered. On Earth, Marcus stood alone after the others had gone, staring at the empty projection table. He could still hear Rachel's last words, the defiance in her tone. He closed his eyes and whispered a promise into the silence. They'll pay, not in anger, not in vengeance. They'll pay because they left us no choice. Outside, the night sky above Earth looked unchanged, serene and indifferent. But beneath that quiet sky, a storm was rising, one the galaxy had never seen before. The first strike came without warning, precise as a surgeon's scalpel. An alien listening post perched along the rim of a contested system flickered with static, its long-range sensors blinded in an instant. Before its operators could recover, the station split apart in silence, fire blossoming outward like a flower unfolding in the void. No human transmission announced the attack. No threat accompanied it. Only the wreckage remained, drifting lifelessly among the stars. Admiral Frex stared at the tactical display aboard his flagship, mandibles twitching in irritation. How? He demanded. The human colonies had always been predictable, fragile things, lashing out with desperation before succumbing to fire. This was surgical, coordinated, professional. He snapped his gaze to his aides, who busied themselves with meaningless recalculations rather than meet his eyes. One finally spoke, voice thin. We detected nothing, Admiral. No hyperspace signatures, no drive trails. The station was simply gone. Frex leaned back, his expression twisting between annoyance and disbelief. Ghosts don't fire torpedoes. Find me answers. Far away, in the fortified command center on Luna, Admiral Kian watched the same destruction unfold on a secure feed. His hands remained folded behind his back, posture immaculate. Around him, officers whispered, but their voices carried no triumph. They did not gloat. They had expected this. Confirmation, he asked. Yes, sir. Target neutralized. 0 human losses. Kian allowed himself a slow breath. It was working. Years of preparation, of hidden budgets, of misdirection and secrecy were now sliding into motion exactly as planned. The aliens had been allowed to believe humanity weak, fractured, incapable of organized response. Sacrificial colonies had drawn their attention, painted the picture of desperation. And now, with the blood of innocence still fresh, humanity's mask was slipping. Captain Elias Vance stood at the edge of the operations floor, watching the admirals in silence. His crew had carried out the strike flawlessly, but his chest tightened at the cost. Rachel Anders's colony still haunted him. He could still see her face from years ago, laughing in a dusty academy yard. Now she was ashes on a nameless world. The success of the plan did not dull that ache. It sharpened it. Kian's voice cut across his thoughts. Captain Vance, your squadron's performance was satisfactory. Vance inclined his head. With respect, sir, it wasn't enough. They took 60,000 lives. The Admiral regarded him evenly. And how many do you intend to take in return? Vance did not answer immediately. His jaw worked, his pulse quickened, but when he finally spoke, his words carried weight. As many as it takes for them to understand we're not prey. The room fell silent. For a moment, even the hum of machinery seemed subdued. Kian's gaze lingered on him, unreadable, before he gave a small nod. Then you'll have your chance. In the alien capital, the High Council received scattered reports of human mobilization. The chamber echoed with derision. One counselor, scales gleaming under the chamber's harsh lights, scoffed at the intelligence briefs. 500,000 ships. Laughable. The apes could not possibly build so many, let alone maintain them. This is propaganda, designed to frighten us. Another counselor, older, leaned forward with unease carved into his features. And yet the listening post is gone. Entire fleets report contact with nothing. No warnings, no detected ships. They strike like shadows. The chamber dissolved into argument, voices clashing in waves of arrogance and fear. At the center, Admiral Threx waited, listening. His claws tapped against the table, steady and deliberate, betraying the storm under his calm exterior. Finally, when the noise reached its peak, he rose. His voice cut clean through the chaos. I was there when the colony fell. I saw their militia fight to the last scrap of metal. It was not courage born of hope. It was defiance born of history. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. We have underestimated them. Murmurs filled the chamber. Some counselors dismissed him outright, their pride blinding them. Others listened, troubled. Threx's eyes swept across them, hard and cold. You call them primitive. You call them fractured. Yet we forget they are forged in war. Their history is written in blood, wars that burn continents, weapons that could shatter worlds. And now they are united. His words hung in the air like smoke. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then one of the younger counselors sneered. Superstition. You speak of myths. Even if they are what you claim, they cannot match the might of the Empire. Threx did not argue further. He simply sat, his silence more condemning than any retort. Meanwhile, humanity moved with chilling precision. Shipyards on Mars glowed red with activity, their forges pouring steel into warship hulls that had been waiting under false registries. On Earth's oceans, colossal carriers, ostensibly retired, rose from hidden docks, crews pouring aboard in disciplined silence. No anthem played, no speeches were given. The work spoke for itself. Captain Vance walked the length of his new command, a destroyer bristling with weaponry that gleamed under artificial light. His crew moved around him, efficient and wordless, each man and woman carrying the same grim fire in their eyes. He paused at the viewport, watching the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the enemy was laughing, convinced humanity was bluffing. He clenched his fists. A voice interrupted his thoughts. His executive officer, Lieutenant Yara Chun, stood at his side. Her tone was low, measured. You're thinking of Anders. Vance didn't deny it. She deserved better. Chen's gaze hardened. Then give her better. Make sure they never do this again. Vance met her eyes, and for the first time since the colony's destruction, he felt the burn of purpose outweigh the ache of grief. Back in Geneva, General Marcus Hale addressed the gathered command. His voice was steady, his eyes sharper than ever. They believe our fleets are scattered, our people soft. They have not yet seen us united. They will. The room absorbed his words in silence. Orders followed, efficient and final. The hammer was being raised. And out in the dark, alien patrols began to vanish one by one, consumed by unseen hunters. Whispers spread among the ranks of Threx's fleets, stories of ships erased without a trace, of human broadcasts that arrived after the destruction, calm voices speaking promises of escalation. One such message reached Threx himself, intercepted from the wreckage of a patrol. A single human voice, measured and chillingly polite. This is Earth. Cease hostilities immediately, or the next strike will be your capital. Threx listened to it 3 times, mandibles stilling with each repetition. He dismissed his officers, choosing silence over explanation. For the first time in his long career, he felt something unfamiliar twist in his chest. Not anger, not arrogance, fear. Admiral Threx found himself alone in his quarters, the light from the stars painting fractured shadows across the chamber. He had ordered the recordings to be played again, grainy human archives of ancient wars. He watched silent footage of armored men clawing across trenches filled with mud and blood, skies blackened by artillery fire. He watched the flash of nuclear fire devouring entire cities, mushroom clouds rising like monuments to annihilation. He saw drones, precision strikes, swarming machines. Each frame pressed against him, like an invisible weight. Humanity did not fight because it was noble. Humanity fought because it had always been drowning in conflict. Survival was not their habit, it was their nature. He turned away, mandibles tight, forcing himself to breathe slowly. His officers had mocked the reports, and the council had sneered, but Threx could not dismiss what he had seen. Their defiance at the colony, their ability to strike without being seen, their sheer numbers whispered of a predator disguised as prey. The thought gnawed at him, leaving restless silence where certainty had once ruled. On Earth, Captain Elias Vance stood on the bridge of his destroyer, the crew working in quiet rhythm around him. The ship was ready, a predator waiting for its leash to be loosed. Yet even surrounded by preparation, he carried the memory of Rachel Anders with him. He remembered her laughter, her stubbornness, the way she had believed in a frontier future for humanity. He also remembered her voice fading into static, and the screams beneath it. That grief hardened into something heavier, something that did not fade with time. It sharpened. Lieutenant Yarichin approached, her steps steady, eyes focused. Orders from command. Fleet concentration in 3 cycles. We're to be at Rendezvous Delta. Vance nodded, but his gaze lingered on the stars beyond the viewport. They think we're bluffing. That's why this works. They think we'll snarl and then break. His voice lowered, almost a whisper. But we won't. Chen's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite grim. Then let's prove it. Meanwhile, the alien High Council fractured further. Holograms of Empire leaders flared across the chamber, voices raised in accusation and denial. Some argued for immediate escalation, convinced humanity was bluffing with staged attacks. Others, frightened by the quiet precision of human strikes, demanded caution. Words clashed like blades, pride and fear twisting into paralysis. Threx broke through the noise. You will not listen to me, he said, his voice level but edged with steel. You believe them weak because you need them to be weak. But I have looked into their history, their essence. They are not prey. They are predators who have learned patience. A counselor sneered. Fear has made you soft. Perhaps you've spent too long chasing vermin. Threx did not respond immediately. His silence hung heavier than any words. Finally he spoke, low and deliberate. If they come, and they will come, it will not be with mercy. They will not shout their victory. They will erase you with the same cold resolve you once thought was yours alone. But the council laughed, arrogance deafening them to warning. Votes were cast. Humanity was declared a nuisance, nothing more. Threx returned to his fleet, bitterness curdling into a grim resolve. He had delivered his warning. When the storm broke, none could claim ignorance. Back on Earth, General Marcus Hale convened with Admiral Kian. The war room hummed with the weight of decisions, every officer present hardened by loss. Hale's voice was quiet, steady, but its authority filled the chamber. We have confirmed alien fleets massing in anticipation of our response. They believe we will lash out blindly. They're preparing for desperation, not precision. Kian adjusted his coat, his face as unreadable as carved stone. Then let them prepare for the wrong war. Let them line their fleets. When the hammer falls, it will fall where they do not look. Maps unfolded in holographic blue, arcs of wormhole trajectories, fleets assigned in layered silence. Officers leaned in, absorbed, the enormity of the operation reflected in their eyes. There were no speeches of glory, no promises of easy victory. Only the grim efficiency of a species that had buried its illusions. Vance studied the plan alongside his crew. For a moment, he felt the weight of what they were about to unleash. 500,000 warships. Not parades of strength, but storm engineered for precision and devastation. He thought of Anders again, and for the first time, he allowed himself to whisper her name under his breath, as if promising her justice. Chen overheard and touched his shoulder lightly. She'd want you focused. He exhaled slowly, nodding. I am. The alien fleets moved restlessly, commanders issuing confident proclamations of their superiority. Broadcasts leaked into their ranks of Earth's mobilization, but most dismissed them as exaggeration. Only Threx remained unsettled, staring at the tactical reports that arrived piecemeal from destroyed outposts. Too clean, too quiet, too efficient. He could almost feel the human's patience pressing against his mind, waiting, calculating. He retired once more to his chamber, this time not to watch their wars, but to close his eyes. The faces of the colonists, defiant to the last, haunted him more than any battlefield. He tried to imagine what it meant for an entire species to carry that defiance, and the thought hollowed him. He wondered, though he would never admit it aloud, whether his empire had finally awakened something it could not put back to sleep. In Geneva, Hale dismissed the final meeting with words that lingered in every officer's mind. They killed 60,000 of our people. That number is written into the blood of this war. But this isn't about vengeance. This is about survival, ours and theirs. They will learn what restraint means when it comes from humanity. And if they refuse, they will vanish. The officers rose in silence, saluted, and departed. No one lingered. They all knew the path ahead. On the bridge of his destroyer, Vance watched as wormhole generators pulsed alive, their glow painting his crew in cold light. The air carried no tension, no fear, only focus. His heart beat heavy not from doubt, but from the knowledge that history was about to pivot. Far across the stars, Threx looked at his own fleet, millions of tons of warship steel, aligned in neat formation. They seemed invincible. Yet as he stared, unease gnawed at him again, whispering that order was no shield against inevitability. He clenched his claws, straightened his back, and whispered words meant only for himself. "If they come, let me see it with my own eyes." And in the dark beyond both fleets, humanity's storm gathered, unseen, unstoppable, ready to break. The alien fleet stretched across the void, a glittering wall of steel and firepower. Rows upon rows of warships hovered in perfect formation, their hulls bristling with weapons, their crews confident in their supremacy. Broadcasts flowed through their channels, commanders barking orders, officers boasting that humanity's bluff would end today. The Empire had faced countless species and crushed them all. To believe the humans could be different was heresy. Admiral Threx stood at the heart of it, staring at the tactical display. The numbers told him his empire should win. They always had before. Yet the unease in his chest remained, a constant pressure he could not ignore. He thought of the human broadcasts, delivered with chilling calm. He thought of the militia commander who had fought to her last breath. He thought of the silence that followed each human strike, the absence of gloating or rage. Predators did not roar when they killed, they stalked in silence. The void shimmered. Wormholes cracked open like wounds in the fabric of space. One by one they tore across the stars, and out of them came ships, endless, countless, blotting out the light. Humanity's fleet surged forward, 500,000 warships moving as one. They did not drift into formation. They arrived already in it, every ship locked to its place with mechanical precision. The sight stole the breath from every alien officer watching. It was not a navy. It was inevitability made visible. On the bridge of his destroyer, Captain Elias Vance gripped the railing as his ship emerged from the wormhole. Around him, his crew worked without hesitation, their voices calm, their hands steady. Lieutenant Yara Chun glanced at him, her eyes reflecting the cold blue glow of the tactical maps. "Targets acquired." "Orders, Captain." Vance's throat tightened, but his voice was steady. "We show them what restraint looks like." The first volley struck. Alien ships, confident in their numbers, tried to adjust their formations, but humanity's strikes fell with surgical precision. Carriers vanished in seconds, their engines severed. Cruisers broke apart under waves of autonomous drones that moved like swarms of insects, overwhelming defenses before crews could even raise shields. Alien captains shouted in panic across the channels, their voices colliding into chaos. Threx watched his formations unravel. His claws dug into the arm of his chair, mandibles tightening as he barked for countermeasures. His fleets obeyed, but every maneuver was anticipated. It was as if humanity knew their playbook, every strategy accounted for, every escape route cut off before it began. He felt it in his bones. The humans were not improvising. They had prepared for this exact battle. On Earth, General Marcus Hale monitored the war room, his eyes scanning reports in silence. Admirals around him relayed updates with crisp efficiency. Victory was unfolding at staggering speed, but there was no cheer, no triumph, only the cold recognition of duty fulfilled. Hale's voice carried across the room. "Keep the pressure measured. No slaughter. They need to see discipline." In space, Vance's destroyer cut through the melee, drones tearing apart enemy corvettes with frightening ease. He stood unmoving, his heart hammering, his mind caught between the enormity of the moment and the memory of Rachel Anders's final message. He did not want revenge. He wanted certainty that no more colonies would fall. "Mark their command ship," he ordered. "Do not fire until I say." The alien fleet buckled. Reports streamed into Threx's flagship, losses mounting, formations shattered, morale crumbling. Officers looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. He had seen this before, but only in those human recordings. He realized, with a clarity that chilled him, that his people were living through the same terror humanity had inflicted on itself countless times. And if the humans could survive their own wars, what chance did his empire have? A final wormhole tore, opened directly behind the alien lines. More ships poured through, dwarfing the fleet already in play. The alien officers froze. 500,000 was no exaggeration. It was truth. And the truth was unbearable. "Admiral," one of his aides whispered, voice trembling, "what do we do?" Threx looked at the tactical display, then at the terrified faces around him. For the first time in his long career, he had no order to give. His silence was its own answer. The last phase came quickly. Alien vessels, stripped of cohesion, scattered. Some fought to the death, their pride demanding defiance. Others fled, only to be pursued and cornered. Humanity's fleet pressed forward relentlessly, yet never wastefully. No gratuitous strikes, no indiscriminate fire. Every shot served a purpose. Vance's destroyer held position before the crippled flagship. The alien ship's hull burned with deep gashes, its weapons gone, its shields collapsed. Through the viewport, Vance could see it drifting, lights flickering like a dying animal. His crew waited for the order, weapons locked. The silence pressed heavy on him, his grief and his anger both demanding release. He thought of Anders, of the 60,000 lives lost in fire, and his hands trembled on the railing. Chen's voice reached him, steady and grounding. "Captain, we don't need to kill them to win." Vance exhaled slowly, the tension leaving his shoulders. "Stand down weapons. Open a channel." The connection flickered alive. Threx appeared, scarred and exhausted, his eyes meeting Vance's across the void. Neither spoke for a long moment. The silence between Predator and Predator felt heavier than words. Finally, Vance broke it. His voice was calm, even courteous. "This is Earth. The war is over. Resist, and you will be erased. Surrender, and you will live." Threx swallowed, his pride a weight that threatened to suffocate him. But in that instant, surrounded by the ruins of his empire, he saw truth clearer than ever. Humanity had not risen to challenge them. Humanity had always been waiting. On Earth, reports of surrender began to flow in. The Empire was collapsing, its fleet scattered, its people leaderless. Hale stood at the head of the war room, his voice cold but not cruel. "Secure their territories. Offer terms. No vengeance. No humiliation. Only order." Vance received word that Threx had been spared, taken not as a prisoner to be paraded, but as an emissary to oversee the transition. It was not mercy in the human sense. It was something harder, sharper, the deliberate choice to hold power without cruelty. Later, alone in his quarters, Vance looked out at the stars. He whispered Anders's name one last time, not in grief, but in quiet promise. They had made her death matter. Humanity would never again be the hunted. Far away, Threx sat in silence aboard a human escort vessel, stripped of command yet alive. His mind circled the same thought, again and again. Mercy was more terrifying than annihilation, because it meant the humans did not simply defeat them. They controlled them. In Geneva, Hale spoke the final words that would be remembered for generations, though not recorded in any official archive. "We never wanted war. But now we are awake, and the galaxy will not sleep again." The stars beyond Earth's skies burned as they always had, indifferent to the rise and fall of empires. But for the first time, the galaxy trembled, not because of what humanity had done, but because of what humanity had chosen to become.